People who don't worry about foreign policy when a Democrat is in office? And gentlemen, my friends, we have another case of Hussein Obama versus Hussein Obama on this recent military action in Libya. And I waited a while so the smoke would clear. I know there's some people, custodians from Chicago, who have a lot of free time, and they can sit by the computer and sit by the TV 20 hours a day, and as soon as something breaking news, they throw a video up real quick, defending their view. I waited for the smoke to clear on this. So Obama seems to have a big contradiction going here in his foreign approach to foreign policy. Let's start with troop surges. Here's what Hussein said back in 2007 on the proposed surge in Iraq. Quote, "I am not persuaded that 20,000 additional troops in Iraq is going to solve the sectarian violence there. In fact, I think it will do the reverse. I think the surge takes pressure off the Iraqis to arrive at the sort of political accommodation that every observer believes is the ultimate solution to the problems we face there. So I am going to actively oppose the president's proposal." End quote. Of course, Hussein had to admit to Bill O'Reilly back in September of 2008 that the surge was successful, in his opinion, after voting several times to end that war early. I've covered that issue in a previous video response to a pretend doctor from Chicago. So, what did Hussein Obama do in Afghanistan after being elected? He increased troops there. He did say during the campaign that he would add roughly 8,000 troops, but he almost tripled the number of troops there since he became president. He was against troop surges before he was for troop surges. So what he criticized Bush for in Iraq, he went and did in Afghanistan. Do you remember how the leftist media breathlessly reported every casualty in Iraq, reaching an orgasmic pitch as it approached the 1,000th fatality, so they could autistically recite this and use it to further their agenda? Do you remember that? At least 858 U.S. soldiers have died in Afghanistan since Hussein Obama took office in January 2009. That equals 60% of the 1,427 American soldiers killed so far in the 10-year war in that country. Of the 858 U.S. deaths since Obama's inauguration, 791 have been combat-related. This means that for the 1,241 combat-related deaths that occurred since the Afghanistan war began in October 2001, about 64% happened in the 2 years since Obama took office. Last year was the deadliest year for U.S. forces in Afghanistan, with 497 combat and non-combat fatalities. Obama, the war in Afghanistan took a nosedive when Obama came into office. Can you believe it? And I don't see that being reported too often, because we have a different man in the White House, obviously. Look at all the young men who have died since Hussein took office. Where are the Code Pink demonstrations? Why isn't Lakeshore Drive being mobbed? Why isn't Code Stink taking over Pelosi and Reid's offices? Most leftists only used the Iraq and Afghanistan wars as a pawn. It was a ploy to get in power. They care not about the wars. Neither does Obama. He said what he knew the drug-addled left would gullibly swallow, and then went back on his word. In addition, the skids are being greased for us to continue having a military presence in Afghanistan after 2014, and perhaps permanent military bases. Do you feel duped yet, Code Pink? Moving on to the main event. Obama recently started bombing the hell out of Libya in an effort to protect fanatical Muslims from a fanatical dictator. I already called out Hussein Obama in another video, noting that his yardstick for intervention included genocide. That would have made a good case for the invasion of Iraq, which Obama opposed and promised to end in 2009, but didn't. Let's take a trip back in time and see what Obama's yardstick is for starting a war. Remember, he opposed military action in Iraq. Quote, "But the fact of the matter is that when we don't talk to the American people, we're debating the most important foreign policy issues that we face, and the American people have a right to know. It is not just Washington insiders that are part of the debate that has to take place with respect on how we're going to shift our foreign policy." End quote. That's what Hussein said at an AFL-CIO debate August 7, 2007. Was there much of a discussion before bombing Libya? Remember back in 2007 when Joe Biden threatened to impeach President Bush if he attacked Iran without congressional authorization. Biden said that if Bush did that, it would be an impeachable offense. Biden said this back in 1998, quote, "The only logical conclusion is that the framers intended to grant to Congress the power to initiate all hostilities, even limited wars," end quote. Biden even accused Harry Truman of taking a monarchist view of executive power. Here's Hussein Obama back in 2003, quote, "I am opposed to a rash war. What I am opposed to is the cynical attempt by armchair weekend warriors in this administration," the Bush administration, "to shove their own ideological agendas down our throats, irrespective of the costs in lives lost and hardships borne. What I am opposed to is the attempt by political hacks to distract us from a rise in the uninsured, a rise in the poverty rate, a drop in the median income. That's what I'm opposed to. A dumb war, a rash war, a war based not on reason but on passion, not on principle but on politics. I suffer no illusions about this dictator, Saddam Hussein. He is a brutal man, a ruthless man, a man who butchers his own people to secure his own power." He butchered his own people? Wasn't Gaddafi doing that too? "He has repeatedly defied UN resolutions and coveted nuclear capacity. He's a bad guy. The world and his country's people would be better off without him. But I also know that he poses no imminent and direct threat to the United States or to his neighbors, that he can be contained until, in the way of all petty dictators, he falls away into the dustbin of history. I know that even a successful war will require U.S. occupation of undetermined length, at undetermined cost, with undetermined consequences. I know that an invasion will only fan the flames of the Middle East and encourage the worst rather than the best impulses of the Arab world, and strengthen the recruitment arm of Al-Qaeda. I am not opposed to all wars. I'm opposed to dumb wars. So for those of us who seek a more just and secure world for our children, let us send a clear message to the President today. You want to fight, Mr. President? Let's finish the fight with bin Laden and Al-Qaeda." End quote. That's interesting, isn't it? Funny how things change, don't they? Even Defense Secretary Gates admitted that Libya is not a vital national security interest. Back on December 20th, 2007, Hussein said the following to the Boston Globe, quote, "The President does not have power under the Constitution to unilaterally authorize a military attack in a situation that does not involve stopping an actual or imminent threat to the nation. As Commander-in-Chief, the President does have a duty to protect and defend the United States. In instances of self-defense, the President would be within his constitutional authority to act before advising Congress or seeking its consent," end quote. In a letter to Congress, Hussein said he authorized the involvement of the U.S. military as part of a multilateral response authorized under UN Security Council Resolution 1973. Does the UN authorize use of the United States military when there's no imminent threat to the United States? According to Hussein, it does. Now, anyways, Jake Tapper asked Hillary Clinton, why not go to Congress? Clinton replied, quote, "We would welcome congressional support." We'll welcome it, but, the hell with, going and getting it. "We would welcome congressional support," Clinton replied, "but this is an internationally authorized intervention," end quote. Okay, so the UN decides when we go to war. Nice to know. Obama has consistently cited international entities for authorization for this war, but not Congress. Representative McClintock, Republican California, touched on this in his scathing letter to Hussein recently. Quote, I'm just going to read part of it. "The War Powers Resolution unambiguously defines three circumstances under which the President, as Commander-in-Chief, may order United States armed forces into hostile action. 1, a declaration of war. 2, specific statutory authorization. Or 3, a national emergency created by attack upon the United States, its territories, or possessions, or its armed forces. Your letter, Mr. Obama, cites none of these conditions," end quote. Hussein hung himself out to dry. It should also be noted, if we're in Libya because of genocide, because of an oppressive, authoritarian government, then why aren't we bombing Syria, Yemen, or the Ivory Coast? The situation there is rapidly deteriorating. Using Hussein's new logic that he adopted just weeks ago, we should take action there too. If this were Bush or McCain bombing Libya, the friendly fire incidents where dozens of rebels were killed by NATO airstrikes would be big news. Obama has Libyan blood on his hands. The next tactic a libtard might try is saying we're giving the mission over to NATO. That won't work either. We fund 22% of their budget, more than any other nation. If NATO is actively involved, we will be too. We're also not going to allow a foreign commander to have autonomy over U.S. troops or U.S. operations. If NATO is involved, we're involved. Benjamin Friedman recently brought up an interesting point pertaining to international war operations. Quote, early March 21st, Allied warplanes, including U.S. Air Force fighters, destroyed a column of Libyan tanks and other vehicles set to attack the rebel stronghold of Benghazi. Monday, the rebels drove 40 miles down the coast to Ajdabia, where they were pushed back by government forces employing rocket and tank fire. According to the New York Times, Allied warplanes flew overhead but didn't attack. Why provide air support in one situation and not the other? It appears that the conditions, rules of engagement allow the former because it is seen as consistent with UN Security Council Resolution 1973's authorization of force to protect civilians. The latter counts as close air support, which is not authorized. In essence, we are helping the rebels when they defend towns, but not when they try to take them. It now seems unlikely that either side can win under those circumstances. So rhetoric about ousting Gaddafi notwithstanding, our policy serves to stalemate the civil war, effectively severing Libya. That seems a recipe for a long stay, end quote. Lastly, it's amazing to see the antique media luminaries such as Andrea Mitchell, the obese man Cenk Uygur, whatever his name is, Nicholas Kristof and Michael Shear of the New York Times, and others, defending this military action in Libya, but they were oh so concerned that back in 2003, Bush would attack Iraq without congressional approval. Makes a big difference who's in the White House, doesn't it? So if you've got some libs over there trying to rationalize Obama's bombing of Libya, it's a bunch of BS. Just like Obama was diametrically opposed to the Patriot Act, but somehow he authorized it not once but twice. But they aren't complaining as much about it now because it's Obama. I guess it's do as he says, not as he does. And don't thank me now for the information.